The progression of architecture. The emergence of skyscrapers. The U.S. culture at the change of the 20th century, specifically between the years 1890 through 1930, was a rapidly changing environment in many areas, especially in the scope of architecture. With advancements in technology, and culture as a whole shifting towards the modern style of suburban living and working in densely packed metropolitan areas, these early architects had to think up new designs to the layouts of the buildings that they built. Realizing that the most efficient way to utilize space per square inch was vertically as opposed to radially, these early pioneers of architecture turned to a new type of structure, the skyscraper. Although steel-framed buildings were built and existed prior to the Civil War, it wasn't until after the war that these steel infrastructures became a game-changer in the way commercial buildings were built. Advancements in technology, specifically the invention of the elevator, and the refining of steel and iron were key factors in the progression of vertical construction. Because the ability to access higher stories no longer depended on one's ability to scale flights of stairs due to the invention of elevators, and the strength and durability of building their bones out of steel I-beams as opposed to the wood and brick styles of generations of the past, architects could now build buildings that were much higher than those of previous generations. The progression from radial structures to vertical structures was the obvious decision, and the idea to build the world's tallest building became these architects' objective. The term skyscraper, in reference to building structures, actually comes from a nautical term used to describe the small triangular sail set above the skysail, which was the uppermost sail on large sailing vessels. It was then adopted to describe these massive buildings by amazed onlookers that would look at large cities from afar and see these structures piercing their skylines. Most notably the Equitable Life Assurance Building in New York in 1870, and Chicago's Home Insurance Building built in 1885. Although I'd love to give you a true origin story of the skyscraper, and talk about these two structures in depth, I'm really going to focus on the evolution of commercial real estate at the turn of the century, because this is truly where most of the activity around building the world's tallest building takes place. I didn't focus on whether it was New York or Chicago that was the original inventor of skyscrapers in my research, being that the topic was a research endeavor for this project. Instead, my project is centered around the emergence of skyscrapers, and how the implementation of new technologies changed the way buildings were constructed. Prior to 1890, structures were primarily masonry, with brick or stone load-bearing foundation walls and wood roofs and floors. These structures generally were 2 to 4 story buildings and rarely reached heights over 4 stories. The 1870s was really where construction began to implement the use of cast iron in larger buildings. Which brings me to the emergence of skyscrapers. The New York World building stood 309 feet in the air and was constructed by George B. Post in just a little over a year. This was debatably the first skyscraper, deemed the world's tallest building of several high-rise structures in this period. It was also the first building to reach a height of over 284 feet, that was the height of the spire of Trinity Church. Commissioned by Joseph Pulitzer, the publisher of the New York World, Pulitzer wanted to build the world's tallest building as a means of generating free publicity for his newspaper. Partially because of this publicity, and partially because of its comparison to skyrises over in Chicago, the competition to build the world's tallest building was afoot, and the bar to build the world's tallest skyscraper had been set. Between the years of 1890 and 1930, the heights of these massive structures got taller and taller. And that's attributed to the innovation and ingenuity of architects during this period. Their implementation of steel I-beams in their frames and vertical designs birthed a new type of structure and the way a lot of commercial real estate is built in tightly populated metropolitan areas. Their competitive spirit may have guided their actions, but these actions built the structures we know today as the skyscraper.